Mike is on. All right. So possibly I wasn't on. I wasn't being captured via Pedro. Hello. I was being captured via YouTube, but now I think I'm on. The microphone is on. Thank you. Thank you for whoever was there. Hello, Pedro. Welcome back. Welcome back. So tonight, if you have any question, Pedro, shoot. The topic is the list, but there will be many different others. Now, obviously, for this topic, we required to make an introduction, and I was actually approaching to it. I was saying that I love reading comics. I've been a comic reader for lots of years, but actually, out of late, not out of let's say teen or even uh, childhood, because as a child, I was exposed to comic books so sporadically that it was very difficult for me to actually be following a storyline. I was aware of the titles that were on when I was a kid, but I couldn't really get them. I had the chance of finding a comic book that someone threw away, and that's the story of what I managed to read, or just that fragment of the story I managed to read back then. And that happened to be basically how I read so many different type of comic books from many different countries, not just American action comics. I read European comics. I loved, for example, I remember Asterix and Obelix, and that's a French story. I love Spanish stories too, from Spain. I mean, I read a couple stories from Germany, but I don't really can't really remember the names of them. That was long ago when I was a kid. Because again, I was exposed to a comic book thrown away by someone, and of course, that's how I managed to get to know about this. Follow, for example, the little fragment of comic stories that were published in some newspapers, as happened in my country back then. Stories like the Saint, or there was another one back then that was really cool. Obviously, Batman. Batman was in every comic book, or in every sorry, in every newspaper back then too. Um, well, I'm probably exaggerating when I'm saying every newspaper. I don't know if all the newspapers had the rights to print comic books in their pages. I know the big ones had it. So in most of the big ones, they had it. They had it. Sorry. Now, back to the topic. I was more like a fiction reader. Okay, a fiction reader nonetheless, reading any different type of fiction because love to lose myself in stories, as they were always portraying a world that was different than the world that I used to see. Very boring, typical, as normally kids see the world, right? I used to spend lots of time in the countryside. I didn't know how blessed I was, but I did. And for me, it was so boring. So, because it was countryside. In other cities too, the change of scenery from time to time, it affected me positively and negatively at the same time. And yeah, I will say that I used to, lose myself in stories, any type of fiction stories that I managed to get into, because these were totally different than, the world I was used to. In fact, I used to think that the US as a country was kind of like what I watched on movies. I didn't know, like, later on, that the US, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, most countries look pretty much the same in regular areas, countryside, part of cities, slums. Most countries look the same. Of course, every country have the different geographic affection, but when we're speaking about where people live, people tend to live pretty much in the same areas. There are, of course, differences that are related to cultural effect on their architecture. Obviously, we all know that. Speaking about the general stuff, okay? The general stuff of how the city is organized, how the city looks in general. Just the looks that a kid is capable of understanding when traveling most of the time by car or walking. So, of course, everything that was related to sci-fi or fantasy caught my attention widely. And of course, anime was my original approach that I had to this type of comic stories or comic book stories. And I watched a lot of anime when I was growing up. But the time that I actually put myself to read properly, to read comic books, was way over my 20s, possibly 27, 28 years old. Before, I had been reading so many different things. In fact, I was actually reading the most at that time was possibly philosophy, as I was working on research for what later became my thesis work to graduate. You know, you have to submit a particular type of thesis work, and where in university where I work, sorry, where I graduated, and depending on of its approval, you get your degree or you don't. So that's how it works. Um, so of course, it was great that it was at that time when I was doing research that I found suddenly, comic books, specifically manga. Started with manga. I went and well with some American comic books again from time to time, but I didn't really get so. Let's say I didn't really buy into the hype of the American comic books because at the time I think it was the new 52 situation phenomena that was happening in DC, and there was a reshuffle tools of sorts in Marvel, and I found out that this happens every time, every once in a while, and I kind of like got annoyed by the idea that there's obviously not much of originality if you have to uh, reboot again and again and again your main characters, even in comic books. I didn't really get it. When, of course, I found that in manga you have that continuity because every story is an individual story in its own. I couldn't really go back to comic books. Like I'm speaking about action, American action comic books. I started reading mostly manga. Of course, when I read my comic books, was open pages that received different type of publications, not just manga. I was early exposed to Manwa when Manwa was. I'm speaking about the Webtoon format of Manhwa that we all know now, the Korean Webtoon version of Manhwa. Originally, it was not so easy to read, um, a little complicated to read because it took a while on the pacing of every story for you to get to know what's happening. Pedro, okay, well, finally one person makes a first comment in YouTube. Let's say Pedro. I don't think I'd be able to sleep much longer as I'm currently out. Oh, if you read Good Night, Pom Pom. Oh my God, I just finished yet myself, but it's been honestly hard watching so far. Yes, I know what you mean, and that's the reason why I've been afraid to read it. I read about it, and I read about the story that came right after that from the same author. Um, but I'm kind of sorry about the term I'm gonna use. Kind of like a pussy when it comes to stories that I know are gonna break my heart. I know. I used to be more brave when I was your age. At that time, I read every type of gritty, dark story that was there for me to read. Today, if I want to read something that I want to spend time with reading, I prefer to be fresh, nice, thoughtful, but nice. You probably say like I'm a sellout, but I'm not. I'm telling you, after a while, you don't want to suffer that much because there's a lot to suffer in reality for you to suffer too much through art. And that's an interesting thing about art. At your time, this time that you are a reader, go for it when it comes to dark stuff because this time you can bear it. This time you can hear the toughest things. You can you can withstand the power of technology when it comes to images in all different types. But at my age, it's weird, but it's true that little by little I'm becoming more used to not being flashed too much, not being overwhelmed too much with the type of imagery I put in my face. And specifically because I need to go to sleep. Weird, right? That actually affects sometimes the things that I choose to read. So Pedro, I know that you're out, and I know that might not be able to stay longer, but um, I promise that I will actually grow a little a pair and try to actually go and check that story because it's being put on my list for so long, so long, so long that I'm kind of like a coward, really, for not reading it. Anyway, going back to my story, have you got some wholesome recommendation then? Yeah, of course. I'm gonna give you some. Okay. Well, the point of this story is I know that it's in a manga, but I watch actually the anime to it, and it's really wholesome and it's beautiful. It's called Erase. Okay, but the Japanese version of the story, I'm gonna have to look for it for you because I don't know. Erase is a story based on it's a combination of things in reality, and I love it. It's so beautiful. What's the story? Is as a summary the story of a kid that found his way to redeem himself for something that he always blamed to be, to have been blessed with. Weird roundabout that I made in order to say this, but it's true. He has a particular type of power, but he doesn't really see it as a power. He sees it more as a curse. The power is that he's capable of predicting, sort of, when something bad is about to happen. I mean, he get to see some flashes of things around him, like sort of hallucinations, and these hallucinations are uh, let's say like a weird looking butterfly that shouldn't be there or stuff like this, right? So he knows that something is about to happen, that he's getting these signs of something dreadful is about to happen, and he has to choose whether he intervenes or not. And it happens that every time he decides to intervene, he ends up paying himself with something. There's some consequence to himself about this thing. Therefore, of course, he's afraid of using at such a scale. It's not something that he chooses to use naturally until it happened that it actually affected his life terribly because it made him lose. Sorry, it made him lose the sense of something that was very important, and when that happened, he lost an important person. And I cannot really tell you again more because I will spoil the rest of the story for you. But the story is so good, so good, so good that what can I say? Let me see if I can find the name of the story. Okay, here is um, erased manga about kidnapping, maybe. Yeah. Okay, I found the name, the look, but I don't know if the title Should be that one. Give me a second. Erase manga. Okay, the name in Japanese is called Boku Dake. Boku Dake. And that, my friend, is incredible. It's just incredible. Okay, so I suggest check that story and take the recommendation of checking everything of that author, because I mean, if you're looking for dark stories that at the same time are really wholesome, that guy, that guy, he has all the way from edgy to horror to action to mystery. The mystery part is the best part, and you can recognize him because of the type of drawing that he has. He has a very particular type of drawing that was really particular in the 70s, and you get like the suggestive type of voluptuous girls from Spanish comics actually had that, French comics I guess, and of course Japanese comics got that too. Volu- the voluptuousness, basically it was something of the 70s, and the pret-a-porter was also true, that happened to be around that time. That was the famous introduction 10 years before of the bikini, and so on and so forth. We're speaking about the a time in which this particular type of behavior was so common in the media, and of course that influenced some type of um, artist, manga artist in particular. And this guy, he keeps making the same particular type of design that resembles that time. So you will enjoy it just because of that. So remember, the story of what I said is, let me repeat again, Boku Dake from the person. Oh, Dake ga Inai Machi. Boku Dake ga Inai Machi. That'll be the full thing. And in English, easy to get it, erased. Uh, Now, why reading these stories in English was so important? At the time, my level of English was, let's say, just functional. And at the time I actually was working as an English teacher. But I still consider myself as being a functional speaker in terms of, I was capable of just saying what I needed to say at the moment, no more than that. To be honest, I never really was capable of impress myself. So of course, if I wanted to attempt getting a certification, I was not really gonna be able to get a higher degree than the ones that I really required to get, promotions in my work, etc., etc. But since I started reading comics, there was some change in the way I started like performing generally, because of how I began to let's say get adapted to, or get used to a type of vocabulary that was, let's say, at first alien for me, because as an ESL student I was exposed to what everybody was exposed to, and the typical English that you learn when you are an ESL student is the multimedia student. Like, hello, you need to speak like this. Everybody and every person needs to make something to sound similar to the way I am speaking to you. But you know that native speakers everywhere in the world do not sound like that. Sound natural. That naturalness is not something that you learn as an ESL student. It's something that you learn once you begin to go to these countries, whatever this process that you're learning, the English accents that you will end up developing, normally happens, right? So, as an ESL student, you become flat speaker, you become general speaker, you tend to sound and tend to use even expressions and terms that are, let's say, universally understandable, but you don't get to impress anyone. I mean, the way you get to speak with people do not really sound more than what you're capable of doing, which is just the thing, all right? Something just pretty much mechanical. Now, comic books did this to me because, of course, when you read a comic book, one of the things that you get across with is, sorry, there's someone at the door. So, sorry, people. It's live. We're doing it live. Love, love, baby. Give me a second, people. Uh,
Hola vecino, buenas noches. Disculpe que lo interrumpa. Quisiera hacer un jamoncito y el timbolito y un manjar.
te agradezco mucho. Muchas gracias.
De nada. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego. Well, sorry, people. I apparently got food. So, as I was saying, people, I'm really sorry. This interruption got uh, first time, I guess, in the lives that we work on these days, Fridays. I mean, weird, first time. Anyway, thank you, people, for your patience. I was saying just before. Okay, manga has that thing, oh, comic books in general, not just manga, but comic books in general have that thing that they're written in dialogues. You don't get to read just simply prose. In fact, even when there is a moment for a narrator to be expressing an idea, no matter how long the narrator speaks through the idea, the majority of the text that you get to read is written in dialogues. And dialogues vary depending on the people that you are reading about. It all depends on basically, I mean, they all vary depending on the levels of people that are speaking and interacting in whichever situation it is. If you, for example, get to see, I don't know, let's say the stereotypical thug looking person that will speak harshly and will abuse of other people with certain type of words. Well, that person is represented easily represented with the vocabulary that is chosen to be, uh, used by the author. Same situation will happen with the elderly person. It will definitely sound different than, let's say, the older adult that let's say is an executive or a professional, a teacher, or so on and so forth. Depending on who you're representing, the language that the person is used is going to be represented in the form of the dialogue. And that has, I mean, once you're exposed to it, that traces forms for you to imagine how each individual will sound depending on that situation. And the fact that you have that exposed to your brain, I guess that your brain takes it on its own to make comparisons and see how, for example, people that you know that's let's say elderly people speaking your own language, Spanish or whichever your first language is, and you get that comparison to what you are reading, and you will basically make connections that would allow you to adopt forms, ways in which you can actually express yourself better, like adapting to what you want to say. At first, I didn't see it that way because at first I was not really working in that level using comic books. But a few years later, with the different levels that obviously I began to show in my performance at the different places where I worked, I realized that, I mean, the latest thing that I was doing. was adding to my arsenal back then when working was simply just the fact that I spent hours and hours and hours reading on my free time. And what I was reading beyond philosophy, because I remember I told you guys that that was the time that I was working on my research. Every time that I had the chance that I was not researching, I was just resting. Then I was reading comics. Of course, I was reading lots, copious amounts of manga titles. I read so many different ones that, of course, I'm not gonna be speaking about them because many were crap. True, not really worth the chance of recommending them. But there were some that were just incredible, and I still remember them. I remember having told you already about two. One was Shamo. That was a strange recommendation because it's not really a good story. It's actually a really gruesome story. And the other one was Vagabond, which is a story that I strongly recommend you guys to read. But there's a lot of people that have have spoken about this a lot on different medias, YouTube and Instagram, and even I guess TikTok. Lots of people actually work on this. The People that are the professional reviewers or comic analysts, comic book analysts, manga analysts, etc., etc. We are not exactly that. We don't want to get to steal their job. That's not the purpose of us here. The purpose is saying how cool it is that you use comics to learn about stuff. It was weird, but you do. As mentioned, that happened to me as a consequence of my exposure to this great hobby that I had. So let's begin. One of my first stories that I got caught so deeply, and that I still remember. Once I finished it, that this bittersweet feeling of you're not gonna be capable of continuing reading about it, but then you will be, uh, obviously because the story is over. You're not gonna be able to read anymore about it, but at the end, I mean, it's over and it's good. But one of this was the case of Claymore. Claymore, action story originally, action story oriented, but then much more deeper than simply just the action part. Um, let's make a summary of what the story is about. Disclaimer, it's a long finished story. Let me Google quickly who the author of the story is in case you want to check it out. Uh, let's say, all right, and the name is Claymore. CLA, uh-huh, YMORE. Claymore. All right. Is the license Claymore, and the Japanese name apparently is the same. Uh, it was illustrated by Norihiro Yagi. And let me see if I have more information in the Wikipedia. Uh, Stylized as Claymore. Yeah. Genre is adventure and dark. Uh, doesn't have another name. No. Okay, that was originally the name. It was made into an anime by Manwha, so great place for you to get a story. The bad thing with it is that it was never finished, and of course, the bittersweet taste was bad all the all the way from the anime. I finished the manga, of course, afterwards, and the manga, oh man, so heavy on the things it deals with. Uh, I'm not gonna tell you the full story. I will only tell you the general things that you need to know. Okay, this is a world, medieval world, in which people get eaten by these beings that are called Joma. Okay, and the Joma are some sort of demons, right? The Joma are capable of even possessing a person, adapting the person from within, kind of like aliens in terms of that thing coming out of you from you, but not necessarily the way it was put in you. It was just simply this demon that got in you, and those are the ones that are not very strong. The ones that are strong enough, they don't need to do that. They just go rampant and kill everyone that they see. The ones that hide within people are the ones that normally get caught with time, because they are the ones that like to eat with time in a place wherever they settle. Because again, that's a major problem that Yoma produce, that they eat people. So of course, lots of people want to survive. They try to do anything in their power to rid themselves of these Yoma, and they cannot do it because regular weapons do not really do much to these beasts unless you pay to the right people, right? And this is one of the connections that you get about what the story is about. It has a lot of political innuendos, and that you can actually connect to real life things, as for example, militarism, or paramilitarism. Sorry, and also mercenarism. What else? um, ah, and the use, sorry, the influence of major actors that you know are determining for a situation that happens at a place, simply because of their influence, as in this case funds, right? One of them we can actually mention is the pharmaceutics. The pharmaceutical industry in this story is portrayed, wow, even better than the church in terms of how much power they hold. And in reality, yeah, pharmaceutics, I mean, come on, they're powerful. Not denouncing, not really saying anything. I'm just stating what it is that everybody knows. So this story is great if you want to check it out, because many different reasons. You got all the way from the characters. You got an interaction between a main character and specifically one sub character, supporting character, that is a boy. The main character is a lady, and the most of people like her are the claymores, because apparently they cannot have guys be claymores, since guys cannot really control their issue. And the issue is that claymores are made with parts of Joma that are inserted, you know, like sewing in the bodies of regular people after lots of training and some drugs experiments. They make that these people become these half breeds of Joma. Of course, not really half breeds. They are mostly human with this core, forced inserted core, that if it gets out of control, he managed to make, to take over the humanity of a person that submitted themselves to getting into it, and becomes a prey from the same organization that produces the claimers. And of course, men cannot hold it. That's the reason why there are no male claimers. There are only fallen claimers, and the fallen is that category given to those that have reached that level, that originally were part of the organization of claimers, originally hunting Yoma, but couldn't control it. That being capable of controlling the thing, they fell from grace, and they can become horrendous and dangerous things. Some of them get to like the utmost limit that are called the abyssal ones, and just simply by the power, um, the, the power game structure, the story is fun. But apart from that, the interactions that we have between the protagonist and all the people that she gets in contact with, but specifically with this boy, are quite heartwarming because you get to see that there is an intention of responsibility, but at the same time, it's not really guilt, but it sounds a little like guilt, and mostly like a search of redemption of sorts. You feel all these emotions that be turn it into some sort of love, affectuation from Claire, the protagonist, to a kid that she had to or she took on herself to protect. That obviously, for reasons, got separated from Claire and managed to meet her again once this kid has grown up. But you see, that connection, that idea of love that is produced just because of the many different things that I mentioned before, it's so human, and at the same time, it might actually be considered so weird and so out of place because we all know that the kid it was a kid and Claire was an adult. No matter how much you see it, she was an adult. So of course, there is obviously the arguable part, you know, that people will say, "Hey, but this is kind of sort of apologetic to pedophilic behavior." I'm not saying that. Lots of art has that, and we really cannot say much about the intentions from the author. But we all know that the connections of people, they do. I mean, some of those characters portrayed by these authors are just exact as people are. That's the value that we get from pieces of art like this. So there you have it, Claymore. Go check it out. Then another story that caught my attention so heavily was, of course, a story I have spoken a lot before. So I will only mention it and I'll pass on to the next one. I'm speaking about Berserk, another fantasy story. A lot has been said about Berserk. So again, no. Then a story that I watched. I haven't finished reading it. I began long ago, but I haven't finished reading it because I watched the anime. And there's not much difference between one and the other. So you know how it is. Reading something that you have watched moving, it has a stigma that the anime normally looks better. In some cases, I've proven the opposite. Like the manga is better than the anime, but you know, for this particular story, the anime is good. It's great. Okay, so and that will be Monster. Monster is a story that is so seamless, so suggestive of many things, and at the same time, it's not about that. It keeps on dodging on its own uh, outcome because in reality, the story is not so much about the outcome; it's about the trip in itself. This is a trip of a doctor that finds so much about himself, about the world, about what he could do to make things better because of his fears, because he was fighting his fears produced by a tormenting figure that is alive because of his intervention as a doctor. Quite the introduction from my side, right? So, Monster, it takes the speak, it tells a story about this doctor, Tanaka, I think his name. Let me look around anyway, just to make sure. Um, Monster. Monster manga. There you go. Monster manga. Yes, this one is by Naoki Urasawa. It's a seinen story originally, and it doesn't have a name in Japanese, so that's the name, Monster. Okay, the story is old. Okay, it's considered a psychological thriller. This is from 1994 all the way to 1994 to 2001. The story and many stories from the same author are some of the things that I can recommend the most because they're incredible in terms of how much they can portray, how much they can describe, how much they can experiment. Because one of the things about comic books in general, be it as it may, manga, manhwa, webtoon, etc., is that they are cheap for the author to use as forms to just simply go let their minds and imagination fly. Everything that you think of, you might think of, that can happen in that imaginary world that you want to create, that is possible in comic books. Today, many movies try, make the effort of adapting that situation. Some of them get a little closer, like, it has been with some of the last Marvel movies, and that tendency of copying this guy, Christopher Nolan, with the whole sky, sorry, like bending of a world, bending of the cities, and making everything implosion on itself. That type of imagery is great, it's awesome, but then again, it's something that definitely has been projected so many different ways in manga, manhwa, or any alike media, that you realize that cinema is simply lying behind. Why is that? Well, of course, because it's not cheap to produce something believable that will look as what happens inside of a manga, manhwa. And of course, you can use that any of those techniques in any type of story. You don't have to restrict yourself to simply sci-fi when you want to be capable of, exploring worlds about people's minds. And that's one of the things that I love about Monster. Monster does that. Monster makes you delve into the weird depths of human psyche from the perspective of regular people that lived throughout traumatic lives, traumatic times, war, etc., um, influenced by people that simply just wanted to take advantage of them, people that had nefarious plans on their own, and you get to see these people changing or not, affecting the world positively or not, because of situations that you realize, wow, it's so cool, so weird, so dark, but at the same time so cool, that I'm glad I'm capable of seeing this in a comic book and not in real life. That's the thing. I guess that real life will be just simply too nightmarish for people to really get to enjoy what happens in comic books, at least in the greatest stories. Let's say, for example, there was this story, action story, about, let's say, a second, about, I think they were mercenaries. Okay, manga about samurai, manga about samurai, uh, with one arm from fronting. it. I don't think that this is gonna show up in the search of Wikipedia, so I'm gonna look for it in Google better. Let's see. I hope that Dead Frenzy. That's it. Yes. Oh my god. Okay, this is another story. Gruesome story. I don't know if wholesome, but gruesome. It teaches a lot about mind, for sure. The name of the story, you can find it as Dead Frenzy. There is an anime, and the anime is as gruesome. This is by Takayuki Yamaguchi. It's based on a novel from Suruga Jo Gosen, Yai, or Gi, by Norio Nanjo. The anime was produced or aired on Woke and also is from Madhouse. So you guys have a lot when it comes to this story. This story has mind blowing, mind bending situations that are so weird. The two characters that at the beginning confront each other, when you see them, they are the products of so much that have gone wrong to both of them. So much. Originally, they were the promises of a newer generation of samurai. But when you see them like that, and you notice, well, one of them is definitely going to die, you understand things can go wrong so badly when people are find themselves ahead of the plans of other people. And it happens that depending on the organization that you belong to, because of your social situation, you can be sometimes the tip of the lance. And as you know, tips when it comes to tips for lances, pencils, etc., they get chipped, they break. If you're there, for sure you're gonna break because you're not that strong. The majority of people aren't to be the tip. So of course, strong people use other people to be their tips. They don't face things from themselves because they don't want you to get chipped. Important to understand this. So we have, in this case, these two great warriors. They're about to kill each other because of some some edict given by their daimyo. It's an authority, the maximum authority of the region, that asks them to prove their worth, as each of them represented a particular school, therefore ideology, that was supposed to serve the daimyo. And according to the results, then these people will choose who will be the proven official servants. Sort of like that I remember the story. The situation is how people manage to make it to the lengths that they take when it comes to manipulate situations that they consider will try to benefit, give them benefit. Not all the time your benefit is actually what you wanted. So the story really is all about careful with what you want. Okay? And another is you should know when to get out. That's the other learning situation, the learning experience that you get from the story. I recommend you check. And I think I am good with the stories for today, but I think I possibly have to leave at least a newer story. The two ones that I mentioned before, well, I have mentioned many, but the ones that I mentioned before are mostly mangas. So let's see, Manwa. There is one that I love. It's a horror manga. Let me see. Sweet Home. Sweet Home Manwa. Aha. Sweet Home. Okay, originally it was a manhwa, but it Sweet Home. Yeah, it is the Korean name. Sweet Home. Uh, okay, the name of the webtoon originally called Neighbor, the same name, eh, Sweet Home, by Kim Carnby or Kim Carnby, and illustrated by Hwang Yong Chen. This one is from 2017. This story, my people, is going back and checking on people's minds, souls, lives. Well, you see, there's another story I will compare it to, also apocalyptic story. That one is I Am Hero. Okay, these two stories for me, they might be alike, a lot alike. I Am Hero is a complete story. It's great all the way until the end. Sweet Home, I haven't finished the ending because I finished the series, and as I finished the series, it happened the same thing that you know I lost a little of interest when I finished the series in the way it finished. I want to really finish the story, the comic, but until where I got it, it felt so heavy. And those were the days when I was reading it. Was during the nights of the first year of pandemic. Things were going crazy around me so badly that I felt bad and I had to stop. And I guess that will respond the respond why um, to that comment from Pedro at the beginning of the stream that I said that I'm not very interested in reading stuff that will make me suffer much. I guess it's because of that. Because that story made me suffer a lot. As lots of different things were happening around me. I had so many nightmares with the story. Story is great though, but yeah, I can give you nightmares for sure. So if you're willing to get the rush about the story, about how terrifying humans, sorry, are and can become. Hello, Ethan. Hi, welcome. So then, to summarize for tonight, the stories that we have spoken about. Um, eh, there was the story that was asked around before by Pedro, that is Hayumi Pum Pum. And then there were the stories that I mentioned myself, such as it was the case of, again, renaming because they were mentioned before, Berserk, Vagabond, Shamo. I didn't mention again, but I should mention again because those stories were mentioned before. Holy Land, Erased, etc. Now, the ones that we reviewed, that we spoke about, was basically Erased, starting from Erased, going to uh, Erased, um Action. What was the Japanese name? Sorry, let me remind you of it. I need to remember, sorry. Okay, there was the Shigurui Monster. Okay, we spoke about Monster, we spoke about Claymore, Monster, this one that I said before, Shigurui, or Dead Frenzy. And we spoke about this one that I just mentioned, Sweet Home, or Sweet Home, the Korean Japanese, Korean pronunciation. And that's it. So I guess this is the latest recommendation list that we have for you guys from A-létheia on the Q&A. So if anyone have a question before we finish for tonight, let's see who wants to say something. It'll be very interesting to know. Questions here via the YouTube, or I said YouTube. Yeah, I said that. YouTube. Via YouTube or via Instagram. So the only question was from Mr. Pedro. Well, thank you, Mr. Pedro, for joining us tonight. We miss Mr. Jose Andres Espinosa. That's weird. He's here every night, the same as Mr. Raul. So we hope that you manage to connect later on. And anyone that is interested in getting to listen to this live, you could actually do so later on when you ever had the time, because it's gonna be there for as much as YouTube wants it, and Instagram wants it. It's already yours. I hope that everything that we spoke about tonight was in any way uh, of any type of benefit, in any way informative, and highlighting, illuminating. If that actually is appropriate to say. Remember that the purpose of this space that we have every Friday, and specifically for the Q and A's that is every other Friday, including tonight, um, is to offer a sort of service we think is incredible to do, that is, that particularity of thinking with you. We do some of the thinking that you guys do regarding topics that we both have in common, because we're interested in this. And any of the topics that we speak about tonight are topics that we obviously dwell on heavily and with detail and other different things when we do our Speak Up Club. So this is also a way to make us ourselves known to everybody, the Speak Up Club. So if you want to practice your level of English to make it better, definitely you can improve by speaking. But if you don't have a place, come over. Not only you get the space for speaking, but also speaking about what topics and how. We have a lot of different dynamic things that are very interesting for you to enjoy speaking ESL format with another person. So join us. We have remember the Wednesday session, that's official one, and the Saturday sessions are the ones that are taking. And we are opening new sessions depending on people who sign up. So, hey, if you are interested in the Speaker Club, come shoot us. Well, not literally. Shoot a message, write a message in the comments down below. Well, people, that's it. I didn't receive any comment. Well, that's it for me. So I guess it's holiday now, carnival. I hope that you guys enjoy your weekend the best possible, yeah, the best you can. Bye bye, people. Enjoy the rest of the night. Bye bye. All right, here in Instagram, and then we have you guys on YouTube. How do we go in